Today, we're doing a presidential draft where me, Ariel, and Fred are picking the best leaders based on how they handle the economy, foreign policy, domestic issues, and their character. It's about who helped the country the most and not just who is the most popular in our eyes. With that being said, in the first pick of the draft, I am personally selecting Barack Obama, and here's why. When it comes to leading a country through crisis, advancing major domestic reform, and restoring America's reputation abroad, no modern president, in my opinion, matches Obama's overall success. He inherited the worst economic crisis since the Great Depression and successfully led a recovery, overseeing steady job growth, saving the auto industry, and bringing the stock market back to life. His signature domestic achievement, the Affordable Care Act, brought health insurance to over 20 million Americans, and this was a huge historic step towards a more just and even society. Even though it faced a rocky rollout and is still having some ongoing political battles, this was still a major thing for Obama's success. In foreign affairs, Obama was pretty strategic and pretty effective in what he did. He ordered the mission that killed Osama bin Laden, the man responsible for the 9/11 attacks. He reestablished America's alliances abroad after years of strained relations with them, and he really emphasized his point of diplomacy over reckless wars. Even though his critics argue that his handling of Syria and the rise of ISIS showed a little bit too much caution sometimes, and but that is not something that should stay in his legacy. Domestically, he supported marriage equality, which was huge at the time. He defended immigrants' rights, pushed for clean energy, and addressed systemic issues through initiatives like DACA. Well, political polarization increased during his presidency. Obama symbolized hope and progress for millions. And becoming the first black president, he broke so many racial barriers in doing so. And it is important to add that Obama led with personal integrity. Through 8 years in office, he remained scandal-free, which was huge, and he really did embody the values of dignity, professionalism, and respect for democracy in a president. No president is perfect, but based on leadership, domestic, his character, domestic achievements, and the economy recovery, Barack Obama remains the clear number one pick.
For the second pick in the presidential draft, I will be taking Ronald Reagan. He achieved an A- grade in economy for using supply-side economics or Reaganomics, which had a mixed long-term effect, but in general was mostly good. For foreign affairs, he was given an A for playing a major role in ending the Cold War and also having a strong anti-communism position. For domestic affairs, he was given a B. He was very tough on crime, but was also neglectful of the AIDS crisis and several other social issues. And in terms of personal character and his involvement in scandal, he was given a B+. The Iran-Contra scandal hurt his legacy a little bit, but amongst the U.S. people, he was on paper one of the most popular presidents ever.
With the third pick of the draft, we had decided to pick George H. Bush. He was great in foreign affairs. He ended the Cold War and destroyed the Berlin Wall in Germany. This wall separated the capitalist Berlin from the rest of the Soviet Germany. He was also fine for the economy. He promised no new taxes in his famous speech, but ended up signing a deal which actually increased taxes. So therefore he was untrustworthy. Because he went back on his word or his promise. He was also involved in some scandals or alleged scandals. He brought Clarence Thomas in the Supreme Court, even though he was under a sexual harassment investigation. But he also created the ADA, which gave those with disabilities increased rights and opportunities, which is really good for society. Now, probably the most complicated but fourth pick of a draft is George W. Bush. For the economy, we gave him an F, a 0. The Great Recession occurred during his presidency, which caused a global recession. It was a sharp decline in economic activity caused by bad credit homeowners not paying off their loans. For foreign affairs, he fought a war in Afghanistan and named the Global War on Terror, targeting the Taliban after tragic 9/11 attacks. He also invaded Iraq on March 20th, 2003, aiming to overthrow the regime of Saddam Hussein. It began as a rapid campaign aimed to disarm any weapons of mass destruction Iraq had, but none were found. He also created the Axis of Evil, which was a group of countries that had allegedly supported terrorists and sought weapons of mass destructions. It included Iran, Iraq, and North Korea, and some other countries that were named beyond the Axis of Evil, like Cuba, Libya, and Syria. And then an international treaty was signed by nearly every country that aimed to limit global warming to below 2 degrees Celsius above pre-industrial levels. This is one of the reasons we gave him a C, because he was good at like targeting and like figuring out where the problem is, but the way he treated like people in these countries was really bad, especially in the scandal, in the Abu Ghraib scandal. It used to be an Iraqi prison, but then turned into an American prison under George Bush, and it was used by the U.S. military after the invasion of Iraq to torture and abuse prisoners and quote-unquote terrorists. He was also involved in scandal in Hurricane Katrina, when it was a huge hurricane, Category 3, that inflicted almost $125 billion in costs, and it affected mostly New Orleans, but also along the Gulf of Mexico. And basically the government was really bad at like helping out many citizens and like providing for those citizens. But he was also created Homeland Security, which combined 22 federal departments and agencies to have one main goal, which was to protect the U.S. from terrorist attacks, to secure borders and respond to natural disasters and other emergencies, which was kind of like the 3 worst things that happened during his presidency. And he created the department to like stop it from happening in the future. And he also provided appropriate tools required to intercept and obstruct terrorism, which was called the U.S. Patriot Act. It aimed to enhance national security and expand law enforcement and intelligence agencies' abilities to investigate and prosecute terrorism-related activities. Also, when he was elected into office, there was a lot of close calls, especially in Florida, which had initially gone to Gore, but then after a Supreme Court order, Florida was forced to recount their votes, which had later proved that George Bush had won in Florida, leading to his victory.
For the 5th overall pick in the presidential draft, I will be taking Bill Clinton. He achieved an A in economy for having a very balanced budget and a lot of strong economic growth happening in the country while he was president. In terms of foreign affairs, he was given a B for having good and bad record in Bosnia and other issues with international affairs, but mostly handling a lot of it well. Domestic affairs, he was given a B+ for welfare reform, NAFTA, but also having a failed healthcare initiative. So it mostly balances out. And in terms of personal character and his involvement in scandal, he's given a D The Monica Lewinsky affair was a huge national scandal. Him lying to the country about it and ultimately being impeached tarnished his legacy, and for most Americans outweighs most of the good stuff he did in his presidency.
With the final pick in the presidential draft, I am selecting Joe Biden. Biden stepped into office during one of the most chaotic times in American history. It was right after COVID-19. There was a struggling economy and a major political division. He did help pass a major infrastructure bill, lowered unemployment, and oversaw a slow but steady economic recovery, although inflation hit historic highs and hurt a lot of families along the way. In foreign policy, Biden strengthened U.S. alliances, helped lead support for Ukraine after Russia's invasion, and rejoined international agreements like the Paris Climate Accord, but he also faced major criticism for the chaotic withdrawal from Afghanistan, and some of his moves on the world stage raised concerns about America's strength and leadership. Domestically, Biden worked for student loan relief, promoted clean energy, and expanded healthcare access, but he struggled to unite a very divided country, and some of his policies faced strong backlash from both sides. Throughout his time in office, Biden stayed mostly scandal-free and acted with decent professionalism. Still, concerns about his age and his abilities to communicate clearly became a big issue by the end of his term. Every president has their highs and lows, but based on the challenges he faced, the wins he secured, and the real struggles he couldn't fully fix, Joe Biden is going to end up the last pick in this draft, but he is still a solid president. With all 6 of the roster spots being filled, one president did have to go undrafted today, and that president is going to be Donald Trump. And here's why. Trump definitely had some achievements, and he oversaw strong economic growth before the pandemic. He cut taxes and signed criminal justice reform with the First Step Act. But his presidency was defined by a lot more chaos, division, and a lot of controversy. In foreign policy, he brokered deals in the Middle East, like the Abraham Accords, but he also pulled out a lot of key alliances and international agreements, which weakened America's global leadership. And he often praised authoritarian leaders while clashing with traditional allies, which was not good at all. Domestically, Trump had a tough stance on immigration and deregulation policies, which led to a lot of division politically inside the country. And he also mishandled the COVID-19 pandemic badly, leading to hundreds of thousands of deaths and a massive economic fallout. His policies and rhetoric depended on political and social divisions across the country, which is something that no president should have to rely on. And when it comes to personal character, Trump faced 2 impeachments and a constant stream of scandals, and he refused to accept the results of the 2020 election, which led to the January 6th attack on the Capitol, a historic failure to uphold democracy. At the end of the day, while Trump had a couple of successes, the damage he caused to the American institution, trust, and unity made it impossible to justify actually drafting him compared to the other presidents on the list.